You're welcome back to Nationwide, and you're welcome back to this special programme on the River Suir. We've come to Waterford City, a city that owes its origins to this great river. Hi Donica, how are you?
Hello, and you're very welcome to Waterford, Ireland's oldest city.
Thank you very much indeed. Looking at the mighty River Suir.
Yes.
What role would it have played in the foundation of Waterford? You know, as you say, Ireland's oldest city. It must have been a key part.
It was instrumental, and you could say if this river wasn't here, we wouldn't be here today. It's because of the river really that Waterford developed, that Waterford was founded, I suppose. And you could go back, say, to the year 914 when Vikings sailed up this river just here in front of us in a large fleet of ships, landed more or less where we are right now, built Waterford, and we're still here today, 1,100 and a little bit years ago, like, you know.
What's the earliest documentary evidence that you're aware of where the river is featured?
I suppose the earliest would be 1373. On an original document that we have on display at Waterford Treasures in our medieval museum, the Great Charter of Waterford. It's an illustrated document, an illustrated series of charters. It includes images, say, for example, of lots of the kings of England. But on top of that charter roll, you have an image of Waterford in 1373. Now, it's the only image we have of an Irish city dating from the medieval period. And interestingly, it shows the river. And on the river, you can actually see 3 ships. And I'm not quite sure what the significance is, but we still have 3 ships in our coat of arms today, so perhaps there's a little link there. So
really, rivers would have been key in the development of cities in terms of trade and transport and getting around.
Yeah, absolutely. And this river, the River Suir, well, I suppose you could look at all the rivers really as the motorways of ancient times. This is how people accessed the hinterland, the inland areas. So take the example of Vikings who came up here, but people have been coming up this river for, I suppose, 10,000 years. The very first settlers in Ireland came up the River Suir and settled along the banks of the river. And in fact, there's archaeological evidence of settlement here, especially on the north side of the River Suir, going back 10,000 years. And going back, say, back to the Middle Ages, especially the medieval period, roads were not safe, they were not friendly anyway, and they were not very practical, but this was the way that people could travel, trade, buy, sell, and move stuff around, you know. This river, as I said, was the motorway.
And at what point would it have been at its heyday in terms of its European importance?
Yeah, I suppose Waterford had many heydays, but if you sort of fast forward, really, you could say to the 18th century, Waterford City and indeed the entire harbour were booming to a certain extent, mainly because of trade with and supplying ships travelling to Newfoundland. The fishing trade was dominated by English fishing fleets from the West Country, but they had the habit of pulling in here to Waterford Harbour to provision for the summer season fishing off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. So Waterford prospered as a result. And for example, one of our great paintings of the city by a man called William van der Hagen, painted in 1736, shows the river there behind you full of ships, full of sailing ships, like, you know, sort of indicating how important the river was, how important the harbour was, and how Waterford prospered as a result. We actually built ships here in Waterford, and in fact, back in the late 18th into the 19th century, we built some of the biggest ships in the world, whether they be sailing ships or steamships. White's shipyard, for example, here on the northern bank of the river, they built some of the great sailing ships of the late 18th but early 19th century.
Waterford is turning itself around to the river more so in recent times, hasn't it?
It is, and I suppose like you could say that the commercial port has now moved downriver to Bellevue. You know, it has been out of the city centre for a number of years now. However, Waterford still looks to the river for its development, and I suppose, you know, historically the settlement here in Waterford was limited to the southern bank of the river, and the northern bank, which we can see facing us there, that has always been underdeveloped. So there are plans afoot, I suppose, to develop what we call the North Quays area, so there are huge plans there to develop a whole new sort of centre there, which will be linked by a pedestrian bridge to the southern bank, a brave new start, a game changer for Waterford that will sort of ensure the development of the city, and the city will continue to develop right into this century.
Well, we've come to the village of Cheek Point, just outside Waterford City, to end this evening's programme, and indeed to end our week of programmes on the Three Sisters Rivers. Over there is the Barrow Bridge, which marks the meeting point of the rivers. The Nore and the Barrow are joined together just above New Ross and flow under the bridge behind me to meet the mighty River Suir. Together, the Three Sister Rivers flow to the sea through Waterford Harbour at Dunmore East. I hope you've enjoyed our programmes. I certainly have enjoyed my journey and my adventures on all three rivers. And so from all of us on the nationwide team in Cheek Point in County Waterford, good evening. On next Monday's Nationwide, we visit Kylemore Abbey in Connemara, where 100 years ago the Benedictine nuns settled after fleeing war in Belgium. We see how, as well as prayer, the sisters have turned to tourism and now welcome over 500,000 visitors a year.
Two celebs head off on holiday, one taking 5-star, the other economy, on High Road, Low Road next Thursday night at 8:30. Next tonight, though, here on One Comedy with Young Sheldon.